Hello and welcome everyone to the live demo session on SAP UI5 and Fiori training with OData services on Business Application Studio and Web IDE tool. In this demo session, we are going to look at the core capabilities of SAP UI5. We will kickstart our training session on SAP UI5 development, and throughout next 40 hours of training, you are going to learn the core concepts of UI5, Fiori, OData services, integration and deployment of custom Fiori apps in SAP system. Whether you're working on SAP Business One or SAP ECC, Suite on HANA or S4HANA, this is going to be the same for all of you, and you'll be able to build custom Fiori apps based on your requirement with the help of this training. So let's understand who is this course for. So you can see here different personas to visualize yourself into the shoe of one of them. So meet Kevin. Kevin is a UX designer and he would like to start development of UI5 applications. So till today, he was just designing the mockups for the customers, but now he would like to get it into the action and create the applications by himself from scratch. Then we move towards Stevia. Stevia is a technical consultant. She's working in industry as a UI developer. But now she would like to learn SAP UI5 and would like to start her career in the SAP industry. Meet Karthik. He's an application developer already working as an ABAP consultant or a BW consultant or a portal consultant, BI consultant, and he is now requiring to gain expertise on UI5 to build applications on ECC or S4HANA. Then at the end, you can see Sam, who's a fresher just out of a college, and he has no experiences in past, but he aspired to become an SAP full stack developer. SAP UI5 and Fiori training is a very good start for anyone who wants to build career in SAP world. So let's go ahead and talk about the process of this training, what are all this training will cover throughout from the beginning. The entire idea of this training is to make you hero from zero. We will start with fundamentals of SAP UI5, including the open technologies like HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, and jQuery. There is no requirement for you to know any prior Java knowledge for this training. We will be using JavaScript, which is very different from Java. We will also learn how to set up development tools required to be able to develop UI5 apps. In the phase 2, we'll start with UI5 framework, where we'll understand how to build UI5 applications using SAP UI5 SDK and also use MVC architecture to shape up our applications. In the third phase, we'll start with Fiori UX design. We'll understand the core functionalities and also the design principles to build Fiori apps. The project structure, including latest concepts like component.js, router, route match handler, and manifest.json. Finally, we will build OData services using SAP NetWeaver Gateway system, and then consume this data in our Fiori application, and then deploy this Fiori application to SAP system and transport to quality in production. So now let's talk about what we see today in the demo. So in the phase 1, I will start the development tool to launch Business Application Studio, which will be our main tool for developing UI5 application. In step 2, we will create a simple project and an HTML page inside. In step 3, I will create a very simple view and controller, which is as part of MVC architecture. In the second last phase, we'll test our application. And finally, I'll also show you how to preview the same in a web browser. So before we start, let's quickly talk about what is SAP UI5. What's the main purpose of SAP UI5 and how it's going to help us. So SAP UI5 is a framework to develop responsive web applications. You can see here the word framework and responsive. Let's go and understand what is a framework and what is a responsive web app. So a framework is nothing but it's a collection of libraries. A library is nothing but it's a collection of classes. And a class is a collection of attributes, functions, events, and associations. Associations are nothing but relationship of a class with another class. So SAP provides this framework which will allow you to embrace the open technologies and build web-based applications. If you're already worked as an ABAP developer or SAP developer in the past, we had different options to build user interfaces like dialog programming, PBO, PAI, or we had WebDyn Pros or BSP technology by far. But SAP introduced SAP UI5 to be able to support now different types of browsers, platforms, and devices. The main benefit of these applications are they are responsive. So a responsive web application is the one which adapts itself according to the device. So it's very, very important now for any ABAP developer to go ahead and learn UI5. Now let's take an example of what kind of libraries do exist inside of SAP UI5. So as you can see here, it's a collection of libraries. It's a framework. So we have different libraries, for example, sap.ui.core library. This is a library. Then we may have sap.m, so-called mobile library. There are so many of them. Each of these library contains different classes. For example, this library contains a class called View class. That's nothing but a container of our UI elements. So all the buttons, labels, text, fields, everything will be part of a view, which belongs to UI core library. Then we have SAP mobile library where you see different controls like buttons, input fields, text fields. Like that, we have so many controls like drop down, checkbox, radio button, list control. So there are so many libraries like this, and there are so many classes inside of each library. So what I'm going to do now, I will be creating a very simple application with a view, and that view will then have just a button control inside. And when we click on this button, it's going to open a small pop-up and just say welcome. Now, as you can see, this is our user interface. So that's actually your view. But when you click on the button, what code should run, that is something decided by something called a controller. Hence, we are using a model view controller architecture. So controller is where you will have all your logic. All the processing will happen inside controller, and all the user interface will be your view. We use XML technology to build our views, which is very simple to understand. In our chapter 7 and 8, I will explain you what is XML and how to build it. And then we use controllers to write our logic, which is in the JavaScript. There are different variety of views. We will discuss about them in chapter number 9. But for now, let's go ahead and create our simple UI5 application with just one button and one view. So at this point of time, I'll switch over to my development tool. Now, this is so-called SAP Business Application Studio. In our next class, I will explain you how to get to this screen, how to set up Business Application Studio to get started with your development on UI5. But for now, as you can see on the left side, I have projects. This is very similar to your SE80 environment if you work as an ABAP developer. On the left hand side here, you have all the projects. and the project artifacts. On the right hand side here, you will have all the content. So for example, if I create a project and that has a file, I can double click on this file and the content will be loaded on the right side. So let us go ahead now and create a very simple project. So project is nothing but a directory. So you can see I go to terminal and I open a new terminal and I'm in the projects directory. So I just say mkdir, make a new directory, and I would like to create my first demo project. So I can say UI5 demo. And just in a second, you can see I've got my project created over here. Now, the very first thing what I'm going to do is just go and add a file inside. We're going to name this file as index.html. That's a standard naming convention. You can name it anything you like. That's the starting point of your application to test. Click on OK. And now I can see a file editor has opened on the right side where I can write my code. So let's start creating a very simple HTML file. You can see a nice code completion also available for us to write the code. So an HTML file consists of a header and a body. The header is the brain of the file and the body is what users see. And I would like to just say in the body, welcome to anubhavtrainings.com. I will just save this. Now what I'm going to do next is I will go ahead and execute this. So I can right click and I can say open with preview. And you can see it runs and it gives me a very simple text. But that's not a Fiori application. That's not a UI5 application because we have not even loaded the UI5 yet. So as a next step, what we need to do is we need to go back and we have to load the UI5 framework. To be able to do that, I switch over to the header part of my HTML and will write a bootstrap code. So we use a script command to load the SAP UI5 framework, and I'm going to give the address of the UI5 framework out there. So let's give an address which is available on the public internet, and I'm just going to provide the address over here. You can also just quickly go back and test this address on a browser window. Let me just go ahead and show that. You can see it's loading something. Yeah. So we don't really need to understand right now what's inside. So you can see this is the framework URL where you're loading the framework and it brings you all the libraries. Now you can explicitly tell which libraries you would really like to load at this point of time. You can say data SAP UI libs. And I would like to use SAP mobile library. So I just print in mobile library. At the same time, I would like to also load a theme. So I can say data SAP UI theme. And I would like to load a standard SAP Blue Crystal theme over here. So let me go ahead and add a special classification tag over here to mark this as my UI5 body. So I'm saying this HTML page is going to contain my UI5 application body, and that's why I mark a classification property at the body level. So let me go back. Also, I have to end the tag properly. So we have to end a ending script tag over here. And let's go ahead and run this application one more time. So this time when you run it, if the UI5 framework is loaded, you're going to see a blue crystal theme, which will then show you a light blue color in the background. So I'm going to right click and say run once again, the preview. And voila, you can see we've got a little light blue color theme. The background color have changed because of our classification property, and also loading this blue crystal theme. We can see now it's printing once again our text. But now what I would like to do is go a little deeper and create a very simple view. And I would like to possibly go back and load that view as the content. So maybe what I'll do is I will go back and now let's create a view folder. So we're going to organize our development in a proper project structure. And now inside this, I'm going to create a very special file called main.view.xml. So this is the extension of a view file because we are using MVC architecture. And this is the name which you can choose whatever you like. And let me create this view. And I'll start creating a view over here. You can see system detects this file is incorrect in format, and it also reads the content here automatically. But I'm going to start a view. So I can say core library. I'm going to create a view, and I'm going to put a XML namespace for this view as SAP UI core. As I mentioned earlier in my slide, that you have a core library and that has a view. So that's why I'm referring that this core variable is going to represent my library, and that has a class called view. Yeah. At the same time, I'll also give a normal namespace, XML namespace for sap.m, which is mobile library of SAP. And I will end my core view. So that's how I create a very simple view out there. So you can see it's giving me also an error here that the view class does not exist. So that's a nice feature about this development tool. It also checks against the library if a certain class does exist inside that library or not. So what I missed here is to mention also the MVC library, which is inside of the core. And now I can see my syntax error is gone. I can also read the documentation just by hovering my mouse onto that particular control, but let's get into a little later. Now it's time that we go ahead and add a content. So I'm going to add an app container control, or maybe I'm just going to add directly a button inside of my view. I'll give the text to the button. Let's say click me, and we will say press this button on click. So this on click here is nothing but your processing logic. But the reason why we create a view of type XML is we don't want it to create processing logic inside of a view, and that's why we choose it as XML. However, it's possible to create JavaScript views also, but I accidentally may violate MVC principles. That's why we create view type as XML. Pretty simple. And now it's time that we define also a controller for our view, which is essentially going to be the same name as the view name. So let me go ahead and add a controller name. So you can see system automatically shows me the properties here, which I can choose, and I will give a main dot. I can just give my controller name. So I'm going to just give my controller name over here as controller folder dot main. So that's going to be my controller name. So it's going to be inside a controller folder with the name called main. So let's create a new controller folder. And inside this, I'm going to create a new file, main.controller.js. So like the view, you can see we have a very special extension of the file to indicate the type of content it's going to hold. And let's generate that. So it's essentially a JavaScript file. So the Visual Studio Code Editor also detects this nicely. And now, since this is a JavaScript file, is considered to be a class. So to define a class, we use a special syntax called SAP UI define. This is the syntax we use. And the moment I choose the code completion, it automatically generates the code for us. Now, in this code here, we have to write dependency about what we plan to use. So let me add a dependency on SAP standard class called SAP UI core MVC controller. Why I do this is because I would like to make sure that this is a controller file and this inherits from a standard SAP class called controller. Yeah. So now as part of this function, always we have to use return, and we will return an object for controller. And that's basically the name of my controller. So it's in the controller folder dot main. So that's the definition of a class, which is a special type because it's a controller. So usually if I won't have to define a controller, then essentially I would just go back and do not use this as a base class. But since I use this as a base class, then that marks this particular control, this file as a controller file. So now I can go inside and write my logic. For example, for the button here on click, we can write the logic for the button. Don't be overwhelmed right now with this logic. What am I showing you? This is something we're gonna do it step by step, line by line. So you'll be very much comfortable with that, yeah? So right now it's okay that if you're not able to grasp everything in the flow. I'm just showcasing you the core capabilities here. So now here I'm going to use a built-in function to just print some result on the screen. Yeah. So let's say alert, and I'll say welcome to anubhavtrainings.com. But to reach to this level, we would at least pass through about 10 classes where we'll understand what is JavaScript, what is HTML, what is CSS. Okay, so let's go back now to the index HTML, and we have our view and controller created. So let's quickly wrap up what we've done by far. So come back to my slides. So what we've done is we have just created an index HTML file, which is the starting point of my application. And then we created right now a view. And this view is pointing to its corresponding controller right now. So they are linked. But right now there's no link between our index.html and the view. This is what now we're going to do. So we will create now an object of this view. And once this object is created, we're going to place this into the body of HTML so that this view can get displayed. But while creating this address or creating the object of this view, we need the address of the view. Now, to be able to correctly identify and locate objects inside your project, we have to also create a namespace for our project. And that's something which we do in index.html file. So let me go back to our index.html. And here we have to create a namespace for our project by providing data SAP UI resource roots. And we will mention here curly braces, and then we will provide here the root name. So we will give some name, let's say my app, and this is going to be my current working directory. So what we're telling to the system that this UI5 demo folder is going to be represented as my app. This is the name. You can choose the name anything you like. So which means now anything you wanted to address corresponding to this folder, it should start with my app, which means if I go back to the view, I have a controller folder in the main controller. I have to also put here the namespace or the folder name, which says now my app means this folder, and this folder has a controller folder, and that folder has a main controller. So I just change that. I also change it over here while I'm defining it. Yeah. And it's the time we go back and create the object of the view. So let's create the object of the view using another script tag. What's this script tag? We're going to discuss that in chapter number 3. So don't be overwhelmed right now with this flow. So let's create a view object, and I'm going to say new. Please create a view object. This is the SAP UI5 built-in function to create a view object. We're just creating object of our class. And while creating, we just provide the name of the view. Now, once again, this is going to be the address, complete address of the view, which is my app, of course, which is this root folder, and that has a view folder, and that has a main view. So let's put my app dot view folder dot main view. And now I'm going to come inside and say type of this is an XML object. It's an XML view. And finally, once we are ready, we're going to place this inside of our body of the view. So it's a good practice to possibly go back and create another element. I just put div ID, and I will just maybe create an element called content, or I can say canvas. You can name anything you like. You can say my area. So in this area now you're going to portrait your view. So let's go back and I'll say, please place my view. This is again a built-in function. We're going to talk about documentation in chapter number 11, where you'll understand how can you detect these functions and understand their architecture and documentation so that you can use them whenever you want. Okay, so let's place this in our area, which we just created over here. I will save this. Now we are good. Let me just go back and run our app again. So let's preview the application. And wow, you can see I've got my button over there, which is what we created inside of our view with the label as click me. And then of course, when I click, it's going to call this on click method, which is defined inside our controller, which is what going to give us a nice alert on the screen. So let's go back and test. And there you go. Now the last thing is I wanted to quickly run this in a browser, so I can also do a quick tip here. I can just right click on my page and go to inspect to inspect its URL. So you can see the URL over here. So I can copy this URL and go to another browser tab or a session and paste that URL to just test your application in the browser. So you can see it's the same application in the browser. I can click and I still get my response back. So that's all for the demo. I hope you understood the basics, how to work with it. Of course, this is just a demo, maybe little overwhelmed for some of you, like some of the concepts maybe you're not able to understand in this demo, but that's fine. We just wanted to kickstart our training sessions from today. So that was just an official demo. Of course, I'm going to take you through the complete basics line by line without any copy paste, and that will be comfortably able to build applications from scratch. So let's look at some of the frequently asked questions. What will be the duration of this training, and are there any prerequisites? So the duration of this training is 40 hours and there are absolutely no prerequisites. You just need to know basics of programming skills and that's it. What will, if the timing doesn't suit me, can I go for the video mode? Yes, you can opt for video mode training with most recently completed batch, which is the latest content, and you can ask your questions over the email. This option also applies to those who want to fast track their learning and don't want to be with the existing batch. Now, what tool are we going to learn throughout this training? So we're going to learn both the Business Application Studio and Web IDE tool. Today, I didn't show you in the demo Web IDE, but of course, I will also show you the Web IDE tool because these are the two prominently used tools across industry. So we will learn how to set up Web IDE and how to use it. We're going to discuss that in our next class itself. So what about OData service for server for practice? Yes, we would need that for last 10 sessions, but don't worry about that. Let me reach to that chapter and then I will guide you in chapter 29 about how to get your OData server created or use it. Yeah. Will you cover the real-time scenario? Yes, we're going to develop an end-to-end productive application throughout this training, connecting to real SAP data and also deploy this app to the production system. So I'm new to SAP UI5. Can I learn it? Yes, this course is designed for a fresher who can cover all the basics with us, and including HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, and jQuery. And there is no need to learn Java at all for this training. Most of the web developers do not join UI5 training because they feel that they need to learn Java. Not at all, guys. JavaScript and Java are different programming languages. You will see how JavaScript is built and how easy it is to use it. Now, if I miss a class, how do I refer? So each class will be recorded, and once the class is done, you will get the recording of the session. What's the process to enroll for the course? It's very simple. You just have to go and drop us an email on contact@anubhavtrainings.com, and then we will guide you through the complete process of joining this training. So with that, Thank you so much for watching as usual this session with us, and I hope to see you onboarded. Our classes are starting from tomorrow, and I hope to see you all in the batch. Thank you so much once again. See you and goodbye.